Some games just don't get old. It can be some kind of personal attachment or just the sheer quality of the experience, but there are games that you go back to time and time again, like comfort food. One of these games for me is Donkey Kong Country for the Super NES. Donkey Kong Country is a tightly knit collection of consistently smart, challenging, and fun platforming game design. The game doesn't masterfully recreate the wheel in platforming, so to speak, but it is the sum of everything learned about the genre up to its release. Donkey Kong Country was developed by Rareware and released in 1994. The game was to take Donkey Kong and 2D platformers to a bold new world, a computer-generated 3D pre-rendered world. Donkey Kong Country's graphics were developed with cutting-edge silicone graphics workstations with an early version of the 3D modeling software that is now known as Autodesk Maya. Character models, animations, and backgrounds were all created on these workstations, then simplified and compressed to function as normal sprites and pixel art on the SNES. The graphics wowed the gaming public at the time, to the point of pre-release media reporting that Donkey Kong Country could very well be running on next-generation hardware. DKC was more than meets the eye though. The game itself was an instant classic with outstanding critical and commercial success. It even became the SNES pack-in game and went on to sell over 9 million copies worldwide. I always come back to this game at least once a year, and now I'd really like to formulate just what makes it so enjoyable. Donkey Kong Country is a 2D action platformer about the heroic gorilla Donkey Kong hanging out on his self-portrait shaped island. In Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong is actually the primate we knew as Donkey Kong Jr., now all grown up and ready to star in his own video game. Donkey Kong's got a giant banana horde, and the villain reptilian menace known as the Kremlins have stolen every last one of the fruit. I'm not sure why this army of crocodiles is setting their eyes on a giant cave of bananas of all things. The manual says it's because bananas are the perfect food apparently. A treasure in potassium and vitamin A. In any case, Donkey Kong and his sidekick Diddy Kong, the little shit that was supposed to keep watch over the horde in the first place, are out to stomp every Kremlin and take back the gigantic golden banana horde. For a cartoon simian that wears a necktie, fighting for a giant horde of bananas is a great plot. It's nice and simple and works perfectly as a brief framing device for a Super Nintendo game. I like the Kremlins too. It's simple, but I like the crocodile army motif they have going for them. Though some may not be so partial to them as they borrow from the ever-tired They're Just Animals character design catalog. Along the adventure, Donkey and Diddy will run into 3 of their Kong allies. Candy Kong is Donkey Kong's girlfriend, and she's got the ever-coveted save points in the game. Funky Kong is DK's hip surfer dude friend. He's got a jet plane barrel that the player can use to travel between the game's worlds. It's a great tool to go back to an easier stage to rack up on extra lives or prematurely hit a save point. Finally is Cranky Kong, who is Donkey Kong's grandfather and actually the original Donkey Kong from the 80s arcade games, now happily retired. Cranky will give the player advice about where to find extra lives in bonus rooms, but not without some very typical "back in my day" complaining. The funny thing is that Cranky is actually complaining about things that a grumpy old video game character would. See, back in his day, games were games, and nowadays game players only care about fancy graphics and 3D gimmicks. Look, he even shit talks the game in the manual. Wonder what Cranky would think of microtransactions and early access. The friendly Kongs aren't the deepest characters in the world, but it's nice to have some friendly faces along the way. They basically only exist in terms of game mechanics, but I'm always glad to see them pop up on the map because of how vital they are to the journey. Well, maybe not so much with Cranky, he just provides text on a screen. Donkey Kong Country's 3D rendered visuals wowed the gaming world in 1994, and I think that even today in 2018 they're still surprisingly pleasing to the eye. The game has a cartoonish art style that translates well to the early CGI 3D artifacts, especially when compared to other early computer graphics artwork. Donkey and Diddy are both expressive with their movements, and their actions and their consequences are rarely lost on the player. In fact, there's a sort of instant recognition motif overall with the game's character design. There are just over a dozen different enemy types in the game, and it only takes one encounter with them to realize what makes them tick. Movement speed, jumping patterns, attack types, what parts of the body do damage versus what can be damaged, all of these can be determined in less than a second of spotting an enemy on screen. This was obviously intentional on Rare's part, as various segments of the game can act as enemy gauntlets, and being able to recognize the limited but unique enemy designs is vital for the game's quick reaction design. This information by visuals tactic extends to the player characters as well, as having both Kongs on screen acts as a subtle health meter, letting players know how many hits they'll take before death, not unlike Mario's Super Mode. The visuals contribute to the overall feel of Donkey Kong Country as well, with weighty mid-air animations and collision effects giving the platforming a real and satisfying level of heft to them. And I can't forget the excellent background art of this game. Donkey Kong Country takes place in jungles, mines, caves, and forests, and all of these environments are complemented with detailed, almost painterly art design. The levels are bright, colorful, moody, they're everything they need to be. The emphasis on light and shadow very much complements the entire 3D look of the game. The final bit of presentation I'd like to touch on is Donkey Kong Country's fantastic soundtrack, composed by David Wise. Every level in Donkey Kong Country is accompanied by a musical score that perfectly captures the atmosphere and mood of its environment. A jazzy up-tempo swing number for rolling and swinging from treetop to treetop. A subdued and moody percussion track for the depths of dark caves. And the track that's playing right now, Aquatic Ambience, has appeared on countless best game soundtracks lists. The music of Donkey Kong Country is heralded as one of gaming's finest, and for good reason. These are all bangers. One of the best of the 16-bit age. Donkey Kong Country is a 2D action platformer, and a damn good one at that. Rare lifted heavily from the design of the Super Mario games, but also injected some of their own rare flair and scary difficulty found in Battletoads and Wizards and Warriors. Like I said, the game does feel a lot like a Mario title, just maybe without the power-ups. Players collect bananas and extra lives, bounce on top of enemies, and discover secrets. You'll start out playing as Donkey Kong, but it won't take long before you find a DK barrel and Diddy Kong starts following you. You can switch between the two at the push of a button, and you'll take control of the Kong in the back when you take damage. Diddy Kong is faster and more maneuverable, but compared to DK, there are some enemies that the little guy can't even scratch. Oh, and I guess Donkey Kong has this palm slap thing. I've heard a lot of folks out there declare a clear-cut favorite between the two Kongs, but I've never really had any preference. Though, due to the way that Donkey and Diddy carry barrels differently, as well as Diddy being completely ineffective to certain enemies, there are certain parts of the game where one Kong does have an objective advantage over the other. Some of the later levels really pile on those Diddy-proof Kremlins, and they actually get really frustrating, almost unfairly so if you can't get Donkey Kong. In addition to the Kong duo, you'll encounter a cast of animal buddies to help you throughout your journey. These guys are crammed in boxes of their own, or can be found in a secret bonus area. The animal buddies will give you an extra hit point as well as a huge boost in mobility based on what kind of animal they are. Finding the animal buddies can feel like a godsend at times, but be careful that you don't act as invincible as you feel. If you get too hasty with them, you'll find yourself in all sorts of easy come easy go situations. Donkey Kong Country borrows heavily from design philosophies of its platforming forefathers. Levels show off their enemies, gimmicks, and other stage hazards safely and out of harm's way early in the level to ease players into that level's parameters, before ramping up the difficulty. And man, does the difficulty in this game get ramped up. Donkey Kong Country is hard. The kind of hard that makes you hate yourself, but you can't help but respectfully grin at the game as it kicks your ass over and over and over and over and over. The game gives you plenty of opportunities to build up extra lives though. In each level the letters K, O, N, and G are spread apart, and collecting them will reward you with an extra life. In addition, every level except for minecart and water levels have at least one bonus area. These are accessible behind walls you can break with a barrel or through a blast barrel hidden off screen. Early on, the game basically hands these bonus rooms to you, but it won't be long before they're properly hidden secrets you must use your wits to find. The bonus rooms can be anything from a room simply cluttered with bananas, to a memorization challenge, to a proper platforming skill check. Bonus rooms will reward you with extra lives, one of the Kong letters, or tokens that will bring you to an animal buddy focused bonus area. These are the best, as they allow you to just go wild collecting coins for extra lives. The only problem with these particular bonus rooms is that they'll send you back to your last checkpoint when you're done. I like the bonus rooms overall, but I must admit that the lack of variety can make them kind of tiresome, sometimes even to the point where I'll just ignore them. It may seem like Donkey Kong Country gets a little generous with extra lives, but don't be fooled, you'll still burn through all of them eventually. And when you do run out of lives, it is one of the most soul-crushing experiences you can go through. Since the save points are spread so far apart, a single game over can make you lose 1, maybe even 2 hours worth of progress. This is fine if you're a game developer in the mid-90s looking for your product to have as much longevity as possible, but it sometimes feels like Donkey Kong Country just doesn't respect your time. Especially when making YouTube videos about video games is already a long enough process as is, and you just want to beat the damn game to write the review. Though failing in this game is very disheartening, it's kind of okay because of just how fun Donkey Kong Country is. Every second of this game is a blast, just moving around feels really good. Movement has a proper weight and heft to it without sacrificing that gamey feeling of control for precise gameplay. Like any good platformer, the movement in DKC is what takes center stage. Donkey Kong Country puts emphasis on speed, momentum, and exploration, making for a fast-paced, action-packed twist on the platforming genre. Now where have I heard that before? The game is constantly putting fast-paced and bouncy challenges in your way, and the precise control makes for very tough but damn near completely fair difficulty and challenge. When you fail a level time after time, it becomes a matter of subconscious route memorization and muscle memory. You'll do a little bit better each time, and when it all culminates in that perfect run and you finally claim victory, man, it just feels so good. The Kongs actually spend a lot more time in mid-air than you'd think. Between the blast barrels and routine placement of several mid-air enemies, you'll find yourself in all sorts of situations where you're hurtling through the air just inches away from death. These kinds of challenges in the game have a sort of rhythm to them. I actually find myself going bam, bam, bam aloud when I play this game. If you roll off the ground into the air in the middle of your attack animation, you can actually jump out of it. I think that alone speaks for how much emphasis this game puts on mid-air play. The feeling of controlling the Kongs mid-air actually kind of translates into the swimming levels as well. Swimming feels like a floatier version of the rest of the game's mid-air movement, with the jump button giving you a slight vertical bump. What's fun is that this control is strictly on the defensive. Unless you've found Ungard, the swordfish, you'll be completely defensive as you harrowingly just barely avoid the underwater baddies. Much of the design in Donkey Kong Country often comes from taking several simple design elements and layering them on top of each other. For example, in Croctopus'chase, the level begins with a bouncy jellyfish enemy you have to avoid. Then the game introduces the eponymous Croctopuses, Croctopi? That quickly chase after you. It's not after long that you'll be evading both of these enemy types at once. It's very simple design, but it works very effectively. This simple, layered methodology of challenge is consistent throughout the game. Levels constantly introduce one or two mechanics, ease into them, intertwine them, or do something else interesting with them. It's very Mario design for sure. It's not just limited to enemy type or placement, as several levels in Donkey Kong Country use one-shot mechanics that are developed and ditched within its single-stage confinement. Throughout the game, you'll encounter ordinary ropes to climb and swing on. After this familiarity is established, the game throws the level Slip Slide Ride at you. This level uses the ropes you've been seeing, but exclusive to this level are the color-coded ropes that will slide you either up or down. This is such a simple yet interesting twist that flips what's already been established about the ropes mechanic in one lone yet unforgettable level. Another twist on established mechanics that I love is the level Minecart Madness. This is the second minecart level in the game, but the major difference when compared to the first is that you jump out of the cart instead of bringing the whole thing up with you. Again, this is such a simple change, but it completely changes the way the level plays. This multi-layered simplistic design culminates in a challenging final boss that tests your reaction time and memorization. It really looks a lot easier than it is, but this is a battle that tests all the pinpoint control skill that you've developed in your playthrough, and I think it's a very fitting end to the game. Donkey Kong Country is nearly 25 years old, and it remains one of the best 2D platformers I've ever played. Solid, satisfying controls and constant difficulty escalations make for an experience that respects your intelligence and learning ability as someone that plays video games. Its consistent challenge and clever design puts it in that perfect middle ground, a tough, enjoyable experience that challenges the most seasoned of gamers, while still being an excellent teaching and testing tool for one that's never played a video game before. If you put a gun to my head, I might just say it's the best game on Super Nintendo, if not one of the finest experiences of the entire medium. If you enjoy playing video games, I sincerely hope that you've gotten to, or one day will enjoy, Donkey Kong Country.